So let's start with cognitive challenge. I know that, a lot of people think when they're older, doing crossword puzzles, doing things like Sudoku and doing mental exercises like that are going to be beneficial. But I think what I have learned a lot that it really needs to be a little bit more demanding than that. And maybe there's going to be a direct correlation between the complexity of the cognitive challenge and the benefit to the actual brain. Talk to us about what an appropriate cognitive challenge would actually look like for us when we're maybe starting to get older and starting to think about how we can more challenge ourselves cognitively when we're maybe not experiencing that on a regular basis through work because we're retired or something like that.
So, uh, I think it's helpful to start with what like the typical person looks like, and like I said, when you finish education and you go into your job, whatever that is, generally, even in like complex, highly skilled jobs, which you might think would be cognitively demanding, you tend to specialize, right? So imagine you become a surgeon. You don't want surgery to be a significant cognitive challenge, right? You want it to become automatic. You want everything to just happen, right? And you develop that complex skill. But then the thing is that as you're using that skill, you're no longer challenging your brain in the same way. And even if we do jobs where we feel busy, like we feel that our brain is being used because we're constantly multitasking, we have all these different things, actually, that's not stimulating the brain in the same way. There is evidence that the level of stimulus you get from your work is protective, but in general, we tend to just do the same things again and again and again in our
Yeah.
jobs. And then the point at which cognitive function seems to accelerate in terms of decline is retirement, like you mentioned. And the earlier you retire, in general, the earlier you get Alzheimer's disease, or the more likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease, because you've removed that one main cognitive stimulus, which is your work. There's some interesting evidence around things like crossword puzzles and Sudoku, and they don't challenge the brain in the way that I'm talking about, but they can be beneficial because they're more like a meditation or mindfulness kind of task in terms of what's being activated and done in the brain. So that can be good for stress management and these other things, but it's not stimulating the brain in the same way. So what we're really talking about is complex skills, and learning complex skills and practicing things that we're currently bad at. There's a whole range of things that you could do that fit into this bucket. So learning new languages, learning new sports, particularly what we call open skill sports, where you're like part of a team or you're reacting to the environment, like a ball sport, tennis, badminton, but also other coordinative sports seem to do a similar thing, or coordinative exercise like yoga. But then you could fit in skateboarding and surfing, and right, these things where you're challenging your balance as well as your cardiovascular system. Those seem to be really fantastic. So it's these kind of human activities, these complex motor skills, languages, music. Those are really the things that seem to challenge the brain, and you're activating multiple parts of the brain at the same time in terms of these coordinative activities, which seems to be really beneficial. So then when you're trying to do that, if you're really learning a skill in the right way, it should be difficult. And when we do that, you can probably only do it for maybe 20 to 30 minutes at a time, like really pushing the edges of your current skills. And that's regardless if it's music or language or sport. And then, you need some periods to recover, but you can only really focus on a task that you're learning for a short period of time. So those are the kinds of skills. And there are lots that I haven't mentioned, but it's those things where you're sort of spending time really pushing the edges of your current capacity. And, maybe it's something you can only do for a maximum of 30, 60, 90 minutes. And then, you would come back to it a day or two later and slowly improve over time.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and like you said, I think one of the important things is to remember is, like you said, you're not always like pushing yourself at the edge of your current capacity, at the edge of your limits. I kind of almost think of that as one way to apply kind of like the 80-20 rule. Is like 80% of the time kind of spend in your wheelhouse, 20% of the time be pushing your limits and be pushing your current capacity.